Starting from scratch is not a sign of failure, it's a test of character. Having nothing today is scary, but it also reveals something most people don't notice. Those who know how to use zero correctly build an advantage where others only see fear. When the money disappears, what's left is your mindset. And that's exactly where most people fall apart. Emotional decisions, rushing for shortcuts, spending to ease anxiety. The problem was never the lack of money, it was the way of thinking when money is lacking. There's a clear pattern between those who rebuild everything from scratch and those who stay stuck at that point. It's not luck, not rare talent, nor big opportunities. It's discipline applied in a cold, strategic, and consistent way, even when no one is watching. In today's video, you're going to understand the mental and practical plan to get out of zero with control, clarity, and long-term vision. No illusions, no easy promises, and no dependence on motivation. Stay until the end, because the last point is what separates those who recover from those who never return from zero. 1. The discipline-driven mindset of starting from scratch. Most people hear starting from zero and instantly feel small. They picture other people already ahead, already investing, already living the life they want, and they translate their own position as proof of failure. But think with me for a second. Zero isn't just lack. Zero is a reset button. Zero means you don't have a bloated lifestyle to defend, you don't have expensive habits pretending to be normal, and you don't have a mess of financial decisions from the past controlling your present. Starting from zero can be a disadvantage for someone emotional. For someone disciplined, it's a clean slate, and that's rare. Here's the psychological twist. The moment you stop saying, "I have nothing," and start saying, "I have space," your brain shifts out of panic and into construction mode. Space means you can build habits right the first time, without having to break old ones first. Most people don't lose money por falta de inteligencia. They lose money because their habits were designed in survival mode. They spend to feel better, they avoid looking at numbers because it hurts, and they confuse relief with progress. Starting from zero forces honesty, and honesty is the foundation of long-term wealth. If your ego can survive the reset, your future gets bigger. This is exactly why Munger's way of thinking hits so hard. He didn't treat the early struggle as humiliation, he treated it as training. The man built his life around judgment, patience, and choosing the right game to play, not around looking successful early. He understood something that most people miss. Your financial life is mostly the result of a few repeated choices, not one big lucky moment. When you're broke, every small choice feels invisible, so people ignore them. But those invisible choices are what create your standard, and your standard becomes your destiny. Starting from zero is where your standard gets set. Now let's turn that into action, because discipline without structure vira so in 10KO. You start with a spending diary, not as a cute habit, but as a mirror. Every dollar, every coffee, every app subscription, every little treat that turns into a monthly leak. Do it for 14 days, and you'll see a pattern you can't unsee. Then you apply the 50/30/20 rule to reorganize reality. 50% for essentials, 30% for flexible choices, 20% for saving/investing. If your income is low, the percentages may adjust temporarily, but the principle doesn't. The future must have a guaranteed seat at the table. Even if it's 5% at first, it needs to be automatic, because discipline gets stronger when it stops depending on mood. And here's the part most people don't like, but elite minds embrace. Starting from zero demands that you stop negotiating with yourself every day. Most people wake up and decide, again, whether they'll be responsible. That's exhausting and it fails. A disciplined person removes decisions and installs rules. The diary removes denial. The budgeting rule removes chaos. And once those two are in place, your confidence changes because you're not guessing anymore. You know exactly what's happening, you know what needs to be cut, and you know what's being built. That clarity is what turns anxiety into control. So if you're at zero, don't treat it like a personal verdict. Treat it like the rare moment where you can build clean, with no baggage, no performance, no need to impress anyone. Most people only learn discipline after they earn more and still feel broke. You're getting the lesson earlier, which means you'll keep the money later. Because wealth isn't just what you make, it's what you can hold, protect, and grow without losing yourself. Starting from zero with discipline is where you become the person who can actually handle prosperity when it arrives. 2. Priority number 1. Financial security first. Most people want to invest before they feel secure. They jump straight into side income, smart assets, or promises of quick returns without realizing that a brain in survival mode makes poor decisions. When there's no basic level of security, every expense feels like a threat, and every fluctuation triggers panic. The result isn't growth, it's anxiety disguised as ambition. Financially mature people understand that stability always comes before expansion. There's a deep psychological reason for this. Behavioral economists explain that when the brain perceives a risk of scarcity, it activates a survival algorithm. In this state, you avoid losses at any cost, react emotionally, and overvalue immediate solutions. It's not a lack of intelligence, it's biology. Having an emergency fund reduces that mental noise, lowers stress, and drastically improves the quality of your financial decisions. Security isn't conservatism, it's mental clarity. That's why, before thinking about multiplying your money, you need to protect it. The practical goal is simple but powerful: 3 to 6 months of essential expenses saved in something liquid and safe. This isn't money for opportunities, or for status, or for gambling. It's money for peace. When you know you can cover rent, food, and bills even if something goes wrong, your posture changes. You negotiate better, choose better, and don't accept just anything out of fear. Here comes the contrarian thinking few are willing to accept. Earning more without having savings doesn't make you stronger, it makes you more exposed. Extra income without a foundation is like stepping on the gas in a car with no brakes. It works until the first curve. Discipline beats financial creativity when there's no base. Truly wealthy people don't start by asking, "How can I make more?" They start by asking, "How long can I survive without income?" That answer defines your real level of freedom. In practice, the process is straightforward and unglamorous. Calculate your essential monthly expenses coldly, without sugarcoating. Multiply that by 3 and make it your first major financial mission. Automate small deposits if needed, but make them consistent. Consistency builds identity. Each deposit reinforces the internal message that you protect yourself before taking risks. This habit changes your relationship with money in a quiet but deep way. Once financial security is built, something interesting happens. Fear fades, urgency disappears, and long-term vision emerges. You stop chasing shortcuts and start thinking in terms of strategy. Money stops being an emotional problem and becomes a rational tool. That's the difference between someone planning at investing and someone truly building wealth. Putting security first doesn't slow you down, it puts you in the right game, with the right mindset and the right pace. 3. Save until the first major milestone, $100,000. There's a reason this number shows up again and again in conversations with people who've truly built wealth. Charlie Munger used to say that earning the first $100,000 is the hardest part of the entire financial journey. Not because the number is magical, but because it requires something rare, prolonged discipline before any real sense of reward. Before hitting this milestone, almost every effort feels small, slow, and even frustrating. After that, the gain changes nature. Psychologically, the first $100,000 represents the transition between pure effort and compounding effect. Until then, it feels like you're just trading time for money. From that point on, your money starts working with you. Economists call this the compounding mindset, the moment your perspective shifts from monthly thinking to exponential thinking. You stop focusing only on how much you earn and start thinking about how capital behaves over time. That internal shift is more important than the number itself. Most people make the mistake of trying to speed up this process through excessive risk. They jump from one strategy to another, change plans weekly, and confuse movement with progress. People who reach $100,000 consistently do the opposite. They simplify and repeat. They accept that this phase isn't about flash, it's about building. It's a period where the ego needs to stay quiet for the system to work. Those who understand this don't quit halfway through. In practice, the most efficient mechanism here is automation. Set aside at least 20% of your income for simple, recurring investments before the money even passes through your hands. It's not about willpower, it's about decision architecture. Studies compiled by Investopedia show that people who automate save more, invest more consistently, and suffer less from emotional decision-making. Fewer daily choices, more real progress. This milestone also creates something few people talk about: identity. When you see 6 figures accumulated through your own effort, your relationship with money changes. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to improve and start seeing yourself as someone who builds. It reduces impulsiveness, increases patience, and strengthens your long-term tolerance. Money stops being fragile and starts becoming something that can grow under your leadership. So don't underestimate this phase or try to artificially shorten it. The first $100,000 isn't about status, it's about internal proof. Proof that you can delay gratification, stay consistent, and stick to a plan even when no one is applauding. Those who succeed in this phase rarely go back to zero, because the real asset has already been built, the right mental framework to let time work in your favor. For Munger's Golden Rules, Circle of Competence. One of the biggest financial mistakes doesn't come from lack of opportunity, but from lack of self-awareness. People get into investments they don't understand because they're afraid of being left out. They confuse surface-level information with real understanding and pay a high price for it. The circle of competence is the antidote to that trap. It doesn't limit your growth, it protects your clarity. And in the money game, clarity is worth more than enthusiasm. Charlie Munger was always blunt about this. You don't need to be a genius at everything, you just need to know exactly where you're not. The concept is simple, but it demands humility. Your circle of competence is the set of areas you understand deeply, not because you read headlines, but because you've studied them, lived them, and analyzed both mistakes and wins. Outside of that circle, the risk isn't just financial, it's psychological. You lose emotional control when you don't understand the game you're playing. Here, contrarian thinking really kicks in. While most people run toward complex assets, financial fads, or promises of quick returns, consistent investors do less, not more. Crypto without understanding, derivatives with no clear logic, hot deals explained in 30 seconds. All of that may look sophisticated, but it's just noise. When you don't understand the mechanics behind an investment, every fluctuation becomes stress. And constant stress leads to bad decisions. The practical application starts with an honest question: in which areas do I truly understand how money is made, maintained, and lost? List only 3. It could be an industry you know from the inside, a type of business you followed for years, or a simple investment model you've studied in depth. The goal isn't to diversify too early, it's to concentrate with intention. Focus, in the beginning, is a protection tool. There's also a silent psychological benefit in this process. When you invest within your circle of competence, anxiety drops. You don't react to headlines, don't panic over normal volatility, and don't feel the urge to check prices all the time. Less emotional noise means more consistency. And consistency, over time, beats brilliant decisions made once. Your brain starts operating in rational mode, not defensive mode. Over time, your circle can and should expand, but never impulsively. It grows through deliberate study, patient observation, and small, controlled exposures. People who build wealth sustainably know exactly why they're investing in something. They can explain how it works in just a few sentences. If you can't explain it, it's not an investment, it's a bet. And bets belong in a casino, not in wealth building. 5. The importance of simplicity in investing. The general public is drawn to the promise of complexity because it seems smart. Strategies full of details, fancy charts, and technical jargon give the illusion of control and superiority. But in practice, that complexity often hides insecurity and impatience. Experienced investors know that the more complicated the system, the greater the chance of emotional error. Simplicity isn't a lack of sophistication, it's mastery of the essential. The contrarian thinking here is clear. While most people chase quick gains and stories to tell, mature minds prioritize predictability and repetition. Medium has published multiple articles analyzing how investors who follow simple strategies over long periods tend to outperform those who constantly try to beat the market. This happens because the biggest enemy of returns isn't the market, it's the investor sabotaging their own plan. The fewer unnecessary decisions, the less room for that mistake. There's also solid practical backing for this. Index ETFs, for example, don't promise brilliance, they promise consistency. They track the overall growth of the economy instead of betting on one-off wins. Over decades, this simple approach beats most attempts at timing and active selection. Not because it's exciting, but because it respects how the market actually works. Time rewards those who stay in, not those who guess. One practical structure used by disciplined investors is the 80-20th split, 80% of capital in broad, predictable indexes, 20% reserved for value opportunities you truly understand. This split creates psychological balance. The main portion grows with the market, while the smaller portion satisfies the human desire for analysis and active involvement, without putting your entire wealth at risk. Emotional control is born from that balance. From a psychological perspective, simplicity reduces paralysis. When you have too many options, you tend to either freeze or constantly switch strategies. Fewer choices mean more clarity and more consistent action. You know exactly where your money is, why it's there, and what to expect over time. This eliminates the anxiety of doing it wrong with every news story or market swing. In the end, simplicity is a form of respect for your own human limits. The market is far too complex to be conquered by weakly impulses. Those who build wealth understand they don't need to win every day, they just need to avoid fatal mistakes. Simple strategies do exactly that. They protect you from yourself. And in the financial game, that silent protection is often the greatest competitive advantage there is. 6. The psychology of patience and time. There's a point where almost everyone sabotages themselves financially, and it has nothing to do with lack of money, but with lack of internal time. People know rationally that building wealth takes years, but emotionally they can't tolerate the wait. They want quick signs that it's working. When those signs don't appear, they change strategy, change investments, change plans. The problem isn't the market, it's impatience disguised as intelligence. Real wealth only shows up when time is truly part of the equation. Until then, you're just stacking up effort. Money needs room to mature, just as decisions need repetition to prove they work. Those who understand this stop trying to speed up the process and start protecting it. Patience stops being passive and becomes an active skill, consciously trained. That's when the game changes. The contrarian thinking here is almost uncomfortable for most. While everyone is watching daily, weekly, or monthly results, consistent investors train their focus on longer cycles. They know that watching too closely creates emotional interference. The more you monitor every little movement, the more tempted you are to act unnecessarily. The financial elite doesn't ignore the market, they choose when to look. That's self-control, not negligence. A simple and powerful technique is to set clear review rules. Instead of checking your investments every day, set quarterly reviews. In between, nothing changes. It doesn't matter if the market goes up, down, or sideways. That distance reduces anxiety and prevents reactive decisions. When review time comes, you analyze calmly, compare with your plan, and adjust if necessary. Decisions made without urgency are usually better decisions. There's also an internal narrative that must be trained. Money works better when you wait, not when you speculate. Speculation gives the illusion of action, but rarely builds anything. Waiting, when backed by a solid plan, is a form of strategic trust. You're not standing still. You're allowing the process to do what it was designed to do. That takes emotional maturity. In the end, patience isn't about enduring endless discomfort. It's about choosing the right kind of discomfort. The discomfort of waiting is temporary and productive. The discomfort of starting over repeatedly due to impulsiveness is permanent and exhausting. People who build wealth understand that time isn't an enemy to be conquered. It's a powerful ally to be respected. And when you learn to play alongside time, it starts working quietly in your favor. 7. Avoiding comparisons and superficial lifestyles. One of the biggest wealth killers isn't the market, your income, or a lack of opportunity. It's constant comparison. When you measure your progress by what others appear to have, you lose control of your own path. Social media amplifies this every day. Vacations, cars, lifestyles edited to look permanent. The problem isn't seeing it, it's internalizing it. When your reference point is external, your strategy stops being rational and becomes emotional. From a psychological point of view, comparison creates a false sense of urgency. You start to feel behind, even when you're making real progress. That pressure drives poor decisions, spending to look successful, investing in things you don't understand, taking risks just to catch up to someone. What's ironic is that no one compares backstage to backstage. You're comparing your real effort to someone else's curated highlight reel. That's a game you can't win. Here comes the contrarian thinking few are willing to accept. People who build solid wealth consciously avoid environments that promote status. They understand that appearances are expensive, not just in money, but in focus. Consumerism is an invisible tax on your future. Every purchase made to impress someone is capital that stops working for you. The financial elite doesn't avoid comfort, they avoid the need for validation. A powerful practical technique is the 30-day challenge of no non-essential purchases. Not as punishment, but as a mental reset. During this time, you observe impulses, emotional triggers, and automatic justifications. You realize how many purchases solve no real problems, just fleeting emotions. This exercise restores your autonomy. When the impulse passes and you didn't buy, your confidence grows. You prove to yourself that you are in control. Studies in financial psychology show that people who reduce social comparisons report higher well-being, less anxiety, and more consistent financial decisions. That's because the brain exits competition mode and enters strategy mode. You start measuring progress by internal metrics: discipline, consistency, clarity. This type of reference supports long-term decisions, not momentary dopamine spikes. In the end, avoiding comparison isn't isolation, it's maturity. It's understanding that everyone is playing a different game, with different rules and different goals. When you focus on your own construction, the outside noise loses its power. Money grows better in silence than under social pressure. And those who learn to live without proving anything to anyone end up building something few ever do: real freedom, with no appearance, no rush, and no regret. 8. Learning from mistakes and adjusting quickly. There's a huge difference between people who grow financially and those who stay stuck at the same level for years: their relationship with mistakes. Most people treat mistakes as proof of incompetence, something to be hidden or forgotten as quickly as possible. Mature minds do the opposite. They treat mistakes as data, cold, analyzable, useful. When you change that relationship, learning accelerates and losses shrink. Psychologically, avoiding mistakes is expensive. When you don't look at what went wrong, you tend to repeat the same pattern, just in a different form. The brain craves internal coherence, so it creates elegant justifications for poor decisions. It wasn't the right time. No one could have predicted it. Next time will be different. These phrases soothe the ego but block growth. Those who build wealth consistently accept the discomfort of looking back honestly. The simplest and most underrated tool here is an error log. Not to punish yourself, but to extract lessons. Write down what happened, what decision you made, how you felt at the time, and the actual outcome. This process turns emotion into logic. Over time, patterns begin to emerge: impulsiveness, overconfidence, fear of missing out, impatience. Once the pattern becomes visible, it loses its grip on you. An even more powerful practice is a quarterly meeting with yourself. No distractions, no judgment, just analysis. What worked? What didn't? Which decisions were rational and which were emotional? The goal isn't perfection, it's fine-tuning. Small, regular adjustments outperform big, rare changes. This habit builds a mindset of continuous growth, not isolated wins. Studies in behavioral psychology show that active reflection improves future performance because it forces the brain to consolidate learning. It's not enough to go through the experience, you have to process it consciously. People who do this type of review make better decisions over time because they learn faster with less pain. Mistakes stop being setbacks and become shortcuts to knowledge. In the end, making mistakes isn't the problem. Repeating them out of pride is. People who build wealth understand that the market is a constant feedback environment. You test, observe, adjust. No drama, no damaged identity. Every correction increases your precision. And over the long term, precision is worth more than blind courage or empty confidence. Adjusting quickly is a sign of emotional intelligence, not weakness. 9. Build a life that supports wealth, not just money. There's a silent mistake that destroys a lot of people once money arrives, building wealth without building inner structure. They learn how to earn, invest, and accumulate, but not how to sustain it. The result is predictable: more money, more confusion. More external freedom, less internal clarity. True wealth isn't just a number growing, it's a life organized enough not to collapse when options increase. Here's a distinction that almost no one makes: money amplifies who you already are. If your life is chaotic, money accelerates the chaos. If your identity is fragile, money creates new pressures. Truly wealthy people understand that prosperity requires a compatible life system. Routine, clear values, boundaries, emotional health, and long-term vision aren't extras, they're infrastructure. Without that, money becomes a burden, not a tool. From a financial psychology standpoint, everything starts before monetary goals. First come your values. What really matters to you when no one's watching? Time? Autonomy? Family? Impact? When those pillars aren't defined, money starts dictating your decisions instead of serving them. You end up accepting commitments you don't want, lifestyles you don't respect, and goals that aren't even yours. This creates a strange feeling of empty success. The practical application here is deep, not superficial. Create a simple, written, clear purpose map. How do you want to live your days? What kind of routine leaves you calm instead of drained? What level of complexity are you willing to accept in your life? From there, build a financial roadmap that aligns, where money has a clear function. It's not earn more just to earn more. It's finance a specific, consciously chosen lifestyle. There's also a huge difference between people who chase money and those who build a sustainable life. The second group thinks in terms of energy, not just returns. They ask, does this drain or strengthen my focus? Does this bring me closer to what I value or further away? This mindset helps avoid common traps like overworking, compensatory spending, or decisions driven purely by status. Money becomes a means, not a judge. Research in psychology shows that people who align finances with purpose report higher satisfaction over time, even without maximizing absolute gains. That's because internal coherence reduces mental conflict. You don't need to constantly justify your life. When your life supports wealth, growth stops being urgent and becomes consistent. And that quiet, well-directed consistency is what sustains real prosperity for decades, not just during lucky phases.